Hi there, this is a video on setting up dual boot on the Lenovo Legion Go. But before we proceed, I just want to make sure that we're on the same page here. Linux on the Legion Go is still a work in progress. There's still bugs that need to be fixed. So I'm just going to be upfront with all the currently known issues that I know of as of November 2023. So here's a list of everything. Just leaving this here, and you could read it and decide if this is for you. Most of this stuff is fixable, but not everything, right? So just letting you know. But before we proceed now, please make sure you don't have any micro SD cards. Micro SD cards could mess up the install process, so just remove it now if you want to keep going. And let's get started. Before we proceed, I'm just going to quickly go over hardware you're going to need. You need a keyboard, you need a mouse, and it needs to be physically connected to the device. So here's my Legion Go with the controllers disconnected. It's going to be connected via USB to a hub. And this hub has the Logitech keyboard and mouse attached, but basically you need a physical connection to the device for the mouse and keyboard. And then on top of that, you're going to need a USB stick to install your installer. I'm going to plug it into the USB hub, but you could also, if you have like a USB-C drive, you could just plug it in directly into the Legion Go as well. But that's the required hardware you'll need. As for the actual tutorial, I'm going to do it with the controllers detached for most of it, but if you want to leave them attached, it's fine. Anyways, let's get started. So for the installation, we're actually going to follow this unofficial guide on the Bazzite website where it says dual booting is not supported, but you can do it. So we're going to be following these steps here. But these steps aren't completely correct. There's some small changes you need to do. And then after the installation, there's still extra configuration we're going to want to do. So this is just the starting point. But for this first, what we want to do is you want to download this software. You want to download this partition resizer since we're going to downsize the Windows partition. You want Bazzite Etcher to set up our install media, and then you're going to want to actually download the install media. So this is the Bazzite GitHub. And if you go to releases on the right, let's go download the ISO that we need. So I'm going to download the latest one, which is Bazzite 39. So you just have to get that going, and then let's also get Bazzite Etcher going. I'm going to download the portable version. And then also the partition manager I've already downloaded and installed. So the first thing we're going to want to do is downsize your Windows partition. So if we just open up that partition resizer app that we downloaded earlier, you'll see here that I have my Windows partition here. Your C drive might be named differently. Mine is named like this because I'm using Windows 10 right now. But this should be on any Windows installation. It should all work. So right click, resize. And resize your Windows partition to whatever size you want it to be. So in this case, I'm going to just reduce the Windows partition down to like 40 gigs, but honestly, you could do whatever you want. This is all up to you. Whatever is left, the unallocated you see down here, is where we will be installing Linux onto. So let's just hit OK, and this will prompt a reboot. So we need to hit Apply Changes, and this will prompt a reboot. So we will have to go through a reboot. And this is after rebooting. Now it's going to just start doing the operations to resize the disk. And then afterwards, it'll reboot again back into Windows where the disk should be properly resized. And now we're back in Windows. And if you check the partition size, you can now see that the changes have been applied. So this part is now done. Next up, we're going to set up the actual install media. So here you want to click on Bazzite Etcher Portable. The file that we downloaded, and this will take a moment to pop up. Now that's here, we click Flash from File, and we need to find that ISO file we downloaded. Then next you need to plug in your USB stick. You gotta plug it in, and then after you plug it in, you would click Flash. I've already actually installed it onto the USB, but that's what you should do here. And then once it's done, you'll have a Bazzite installer on the USB stick, and then we can proceed from there. Now that install media is done, I'm going to shut down and boot into the BIOS. So let's just shut down. And then for the boot into the BIOS, what you're going to have to do is hold the volume up button. And while holding volume up, you press the power button. So hold volume up, press power. Now the first thing we actually want to do is go into the BIOS setup. And we need to disable secure boot. So go into more settings. So we need to disable secure boot. So if we go under security, there is a secure boot drop down that we're going to have to move to disabled. So you see secure boot, we can change it to disabled. I already changed it to disabled, but I changed it to disabled, and afterwards we click exit, and exit saving changes. So make sure you save your changes. I'm going to discard because I've already done it. But that's that. And then afterwards, it's going to boot into Windows. We need to shut it down again. So I'll skip ahead to shutting it down. Now that it's shut down, we can start doing the install process. So you need to plug in that USB stick now. Now you could either plug it in directly into your device using the USB-C adapter, but I'm going to plug it into my USB hub I have here on the side. But let's just plug it in and then boot into the BIOS again. So we're back in the BIOS. Now we need to click Boot Menu. In the boot menu, you can see the USB drive. So I'm going to click on the USB drive. And then here is where you're going to start needing the keyboard. So the keyboard will be really important for this, rather than important, required. So from here, now it's going to be a little hard to see, but just scroll this up and you can look. There's different versions of Bazzite to install. So in this case, we want to install either Bazzite Deck or Bazzite Deck Gnome. So of those two options, Deck is most similar to the Steam Deck setup, whereas Gnome is the desktop is much more closer to Mac OS like. So take your preference. Like I personally prefer Gnome, but I'll choose Deck for this tutorial. So let's just click install, and then we'll let it load. So the actual installer will all be rotated sideways like this because the screen is a native portrait screen. After the installation is done, it'll be defaulted back to what you would expect, which is landscape. So I'll just give this a moment, and I'll be back. And now we're in the installer, and as you can see, it's in the portrait orientation because of the native portrait screen. So I'll film things portrait like this. Anyways, from here on, we just need to go through the menus and just go through the installer. So let's just do that really quick. So let's just choose English. So the mouse, click continue. And here, all the yellow warnings we need to actually set up. But one thing that's tricky here is that the network for internet, it doesn't show the yellow symbol, but you actually require it for the installation. So you must set up the internet as well. So let's just go about doing that really quick. So for keyboard, I'm just going to do English, done. For the time and date, I'm just going to do my time zone, whatever, done. Now this is the part that's going to be a little trickier. So for this, I'm going to have that guide that I showed you earlier up on, I have it on my phone here, where we're going to need this information. But let's set up the partitions as described in the guide. So first we want to do is click Advanced Custom GUI. Then when you click Done, it'll bring up the advanced partition setup. From here, what we want to do is click on the free space and create that first partition. And that first partition is going to be, it says it should be VFAT, but the format's actually EFI. So this is the only one that's really incorrect here. So / and then it says mount point is /boot /EFI. So I'm going to click OK there. Oh, actually, let me change this to megabytes first because it's supposed to be 300 megabytes. There we go. And then hit OK. Next, click on that free space again, click plus, and we're going to do that next partition as described, which is ext4, mount point is /boot, and the size is 1 gigabyte. And then click that free space one more time, click plus. This time make the entire partition BTRFS, and don't put in any sort of mount point or anything. Then in the now on the left, that BTRS volume pops up. Now here we're going to do the sub volumes as described. So clear here, just type in mount point / and do a mount point again. This time it's /var. And then finally do one more mount point, which is /var /home. So you could just do one more quick check to make sure everything looks correct. These mount points look correct. Going back to disks, EFI is 300, boot is 1 gigabyte, and then we have the rest being for the BTRFS. That looks good, so hit done. And now you'll be shown just accept the changes. And now we're back here. So now we want to set up the internet, and for here, in the we're going to do wireless because I have Wi-Fi. You could do wired if you want. And the bottom right is where the buttons are. So I'm going to click on the select network and then set up everything. So I will skip to after my network is set up. So my network is now set up, and now we're going to do user creation, or the root account is basically an admin account. I'm going to enable it and set a password, but if you do this, make sure you don't forget your password. It's hard to recover if you don't remember it, so make sure you really remember this password, and same with your user account. For your user account, you could create a username for the name. You could do whatever you want here. I'm going to do Deck, just because a lot of Decky plugins and other software assume Deck as the username because of the Steam Deck. So this is just for compatibility, but you could do whatever you prefer if you don't care for that. And just set a password again. This password won't affect game mode at all. Game mode, it auto logs you in. This password is more for when you're trying to install other software outside of Steam. There's that, and everything looks good. Everything is fully set up. So on the bottom right, there's going to be the Begin Installation button. So let's just click Begin Install. And now we wait. This will take a while, so you could go get some coffee or something and come back. So it's now complete. So I'm just going to click Restart. The initial boot will also take a long time, so I will be back after the initial boot. And now we're booted in. Right now it doesn't look so great because we still need to configure a lot of stuff by default. So we want to configure display settings. We want to rotate everything. So here we want to go to manual rotation. We want to rotate manually. Yes, let's keep this rotation. Let's also reduce the scale just so it's a little easier to read. I'll click apply. There we go. That's better. We can see more on the screen now. All right. So now we're into Bazzite, and this, starter prompt shows up. And if you notice before, these top buttons were off screen and you couldn't really see them. So what you could actually do is to click it, and on your keyboard, click Windows left or right to just bring it into the view. But let's just go through this process. And here, the most important thing here for TDP Control, if you want TDP Control, you need Decky Loader. So this is the one thing that I would highly recommend you set up. Everything else you could read through and decide what you want or not. This is to your preference. Like if you want xCloud streaming, there is an xCloud utility for that, etc., etc. It's all here. So just go through it, click install. I'm just going to do just Decky Loader for TDP Control. When you go through the installation, you may get prompted for passwords and stuff. Here you could just create a password. And then here, if you remember that password you made earlier for the super user, type in that password here. And if you want to see the progress of what you're setting up, it'll just show you everything that's being set up here, and then it'll eventually show that you're done. So here at the very bottom, it says that installation is complete. Next, there's more things to install if you want to install browsers, etc., etc. This is all up to you again. I have no real suggestions here. It's all to your preference. So I'm just gonna click through, and then I'm done. So now that this is done, now we want to make sure that we could set up TDP Control and other things like that. So what we could do is first, let's set up a Decky plugin for TDP Control. And for that, first we need to make sure there's this program called ryzenadj. And that's what actually controls TDP on these devices, so we want to make sure it works. If we type in sudo ryzenadj-i, if you hit enter, it'll prompt you for a password. Let's type in that password. And it should show you a table like this. If this table is not showing up for you, then that means that your ryzenadj is not configured properly, and you will need to add a kernel argument for this. And to do that, there's a command that you could just run really quick to get it working, and I'll just show you that right now. So the command you need is rpm-ostree kargs append --append equals iomem equals relaxed. In this case, you saw that table earlier when I did ryzenadj-i. Since that table is working, you don't need this. If you did see that table, but if you don't see the table, that's most likely what you need. But that's it for getting ryzenadj configured. And then afterwards, we just need to install the Decky plugin. So we just pull up a browser, pull up Firefox, and then we're going to look up a plugin called SimpleDeckyTDP on GitHub. So here's the SimpleDeckyTDP plugin, and here's just the picture of it. And this is what it will actually look like in the Steam UI. One really important feature for the Legion Go specifically is this polling feature. Right now there is an issue on the Legion Go where even if you set custom TDP, the Lenovo BIOS or something at the hardware level resets the TDP eventually to Lenovo's defaults. So you can't get reliable custom TDP. So this polling is just so that, whenever you set TDP, it will periodically reset it to whatever you set it, to your custom TDP. So you could overwrite the Lenovo defaults. So that polling feature is going to be important here. But anyways, let's just download it. So go to releases, download the latest release. And then here, it's finished downloading. Let's open it, right click, let's extract here. So extract, archive here. And then in here, you notice there's all the plugin files now. So after extracting it, we need to move it to the right location. So we're going to right click open terminal here. And here what we want to do is do sudo, which is for super user, move SimpleDeckyTDP. And then we want to move it to $home/homebrew/plugins. And just hit enter. It'll prompt you for your password. Let's just type it in. If you notice when you type in a password, it doesn't show up because it's a security feature, so people can't see it. But now it's moved. So if we go back into the file browser and go to Home, Deck, and then if we go into Homebrew, Plugins, you see SimpleDeckyTDP is there. So the sudo move just made it more convenient because you need admin privileges to move it. So we moved it over. So that's it for TDP Control. And back in game mode, you'll see this plugin in the Decky plugins. Now the next thing I'm going to show you is how to set up Nested Desktop. So Nested Desktop is an app that you could add to game mode. So I've rebooted into game mode and I've added Nested Desktop already. And what this lets you do is run the desktop in game mode. So if you just let it load, we could see the desktop show up in game mode. But you still have access to the game mode controls and everything. So I'll just show you how to do this really quick. So I'm going to configure this. You need to configure this in regular game mode first. So let's just go back to the desktop and then continue from there. From here, I'm going to open up a terminal and type in which SteamOS nested desktop. And this will show us where it's installed. So it's installed to /user/bin/SteamOS nested desktop. So let's open. So we're going to open Steam, and in Steam, add a non-Steam game. So we're going to go to Browse, and then here, we're going to navigate to /user/bin. From here, we're going to change this to all files and look for SteamOS-nested desktop. There you go. And then hit open. And then you hit add selected programs. I've already added it, so if I go to my library and look for nested desktop, it will show up right here. After that, you're done. So you could just go back to game mode, and the nested desktop app will show up amongst your non-Steam games. So let's just go into game mode real quick and take a look. Now I've already got it here, but if you don't see it, you go into your library, go to non-Steam games, and look for your nested desktop app. And afterwards, I'm going to do the rest of this tutorial in the nested desktop. So let's just load in and continue. So going back to this list, you might have noticed that the Legion L and Legion R buttons don't work. So these buttons by themselves don't work independently. But Legion A could bring up the quick access menu, and you could configure Legion X to bring up the home menu. And I'll just show you how to do that really quick, because by default, Legion X is mapped to the keyboard, and we want it to map to the home button so that you have access to that menu. So for to do that, we're going to need to open the file browser. And here, we're going to go to click here and click this slash and go to etc. and look for handy GCCS. So handy GCCS. So let's just look for it right here. Handy GCCS. And here there's this conf file. Right click and open with kwrite. And here button 4 previously it was OSK for OS keyboard. And we just want to rewrite this to say mode. And that's all you have to do. Click save, and it'll prompt you for a admin password if you set it up earlier. So I'm just going to type in my password. And that's all you have to do. So now if you reboot your machine, you'll get the Legion X to bring up the menu and Legion A to bring up the quick settings. So you might have noticed for this point the battery indicator. If I bring up the quick access menu and go to the battery, it shows that it's full, but you notice the actual little battery symbol is the green bar is a little depleted. That's because it's not actually full. So the battery indicator sometimes works, it sometimes doesn't work. It's really weird. But if you go into the performance overlay, you notice in the top left now, the battery percentage actually shows up, and this is correct. So I'm just going to help you configure the first performance overlay option to show just the battery in case you want to have the battery displaying at all times. And for that, what we need to do is we want to open the file browser. In the file browser, we want to click Home. And then from here, you want to type in .config to get into the config folder. And here, create a folder called Mango HUD. So go create a folder called Mango HUD. I've already created it, so that folder will already be there, but just create that folder and go into the folder. Here, you want to create a new text file and call it presets.conf. I've already made it, so it's going to yell at me saying that it's already there. So once you make the presets, you can open it with kwrite, and here is what you should put in here. Let me zoom in so you can see it. But preset 1, which is that first preset. Go back here, that first preset, and have it show just the battery. And we're not going to have it show the FPS, so 0 is for it to not show it. 1 will mean for it to show it. So if you actually want to show the FPS and the battery, you could change the FPS to 1, and then it'll show battery and FPS. This is actually very customizable. You could find more information online. This is part of actually SteamOS as well. So SteamOS, you look up guides for changing it on SteamOS, and it should apply here as well. But that's all you have to do, and then afterwards, if you reboot, you'll get that battery indicator that's showing here. That's all you need for that. There's another bug where if you restart your device for the first time, it may boot into a blank screen. This only happens on the first reboot, and it's easy to permanently fix. The bug should be fixed now on Bazzite, but just in case it's not, I'll just show you here the quick instructions to fix the problem. So here are the instructions. If you run into the blank screen on first reboot, where you should press Control-Alt-F2 on the keyboard to switch to a terminal. And we need to open desktop mode at least once. So here in the terminal, if you type in SteamOS session select plasma, it will boot you in. It will move you into desktop mode. And if you install Deck Gnome, it might be different. Try replacing plasma with Gnome. So once this command completes, you'll be in desktop mode, and you just gotta click the shortcut that's on the desktop that says return to gaming mode. In Deck Gnome, the shortcut won't be on the desktop, it'll be in the top left menu. There will be a menu in the top left in the corner here, and you just click that and hit return to gaming mode. That's it. You just need to load up gaming mode from desktop mode once, if you see this issue. If you don't see the issue, you're good. The bug should be fixed, but just in case it's not for you, this is the solution. And after doing all that setup, you can reboot, and finally you'll have you can go into game mode. And here you can see that there's the SimpleDeckyTDP. I've actually installed a bunch of other plugins that I personally use, but you have that TDP control, and then also your Legion X will bring up the home menu. Legion A brings up the quick access menu, and that's really it for installing Bazzite. And finally, two more things. So basically right now, after installing Bazzite, it's going to default to booting Bazzite first if you restart and boot. And for some, they might want to boot into Windows and make Bazzite optional. So I'll just show you how to do that real quick. So let's just shut it down, and then I'll be back after the shutdown. So after shutting down, I booted back into the BIOS. We want to go into BIOS setup. So let's click BIOS setup, and here you'll notice there's a bunch of boot devices. Oh, actually my USB is still plugged in. Let me unplug that. But basically what you want to do is take your Windows boot manager and just move it to the top. So just if you click the arrow, it moves Windows to the top. And that's all you got to do. Once you do that, if you reboot, it will normally boot into Windows first. And then if you hold the power button with plus, it will boot into BIOS, and you could select Linux in the boot menu. But yeah, it's pretty simple to do that. And the last thing I'll show you, let's save and exit. The last thing I'll show you is how to completely remove Linux from the device if you decide it's not for you afterwards. It's very easy to do. So we want to boot into Windows, and from Windows, I'll show you really quick how to get rid of it if you so choose to. Now that we're back in desktop mode, just load up that partition manager again, and we're just going to delete these extra partitions that we made for Linux, right? So just click here, right click, and just delete partition. And then right click here, also delete partition. And then here we could just also delete partition. Just delete all of them. And then afterwards we could resize this to have it take up all the space. Hit OK, hit apply changes, and then just hit OK. That's it. So now that that's done, we could reboot and it'll just reboot straight into Windows. So let's just do a reboot real quick. So now it's rebooting and we'll just go straight right back into Windows. And there you go. You're now back to clean Windows install if you decided to go back. But that's really it. That's the entire setup for dual boot, as well as deleting the dual boot if you no longer want it.